How's it going, everyone? Bob here, KD4BMG HOA Ham. Today is a new installment in the Shack Build-Out series. It's been quite some time since I've put an installment into that series. It's long overdue. This extra coax has been sitting in the attic space for a couple of years, and I finally pulled it down and said, it's time to do this video. Some of you may need to know how to terminate some coax. So if you look at my single point entry box into the home, you will see a number of coax runs. If you look at the MFJ distribution box in the back of my shack, you'll see a number of cables that are terminated here. Every one of these, I did the termination on the cable myself. Do you need to do that? Well, you know, if you only have one coax run that you're doing in the shack, maybe you just want to purchase some cable that's already cut to length and terminated, and that would certainly be easier on you. If you have many runs that you're doing in a build of your own shack, it might be worth your while to invest in high quality tools that you will own for a very long time to be able to customize cables into the future. These are decisions you have to make. Probably the most difficult thing will be if you need to do a couple of cuts now and terminations now, and you don't want to make the investment in high quality tools. What do you do knowing that you'll probably make more cables in 6 months and more cables in a year or a year and a half, right? These are decisions that you have to make. I'm a buy once, cry once type of consumer. I believe in investing in the best gear possible, not just in radios and antennas, but also in the tools that I use in my shack and in the field. And my first thought was, well, I really want that kit right there. And at the moment in time that I was doing all of this work, there were plenty of other investments being made, and I just couldn't talk myself into making that purchase. And so what I did was I purchased not the full kit, but just the individual pieces that I needed to install the coax runs that I was doing. In other words, these are sized to the type of coax. Thus why they're different colors, so you can segregate them and know what you have. You can just go out there and purchase the least expensive tool you can for preparing your cable to get ready for the connectors on the ends. That is perfectly legitimate. And if I only had one coax run to do, that's probably what I would have done. But instead, knowing that I'm in this for the long haul, I chose to invest in tools that will last me a lifetime. Each one of these cutting tools has razor blades inside of them that are replaceable. And oh, by the way, keep your fingers out of here. This is dangerous. So what you have would be a tool that is a gripper tool. It holds onto the coax, and a tool that actually does the cutting for you. So this is size for my coax that I have here. So let me go ahead and clear off everything on the workbench with the exception of these tools and one of these runs of coax, and then I'll show you how you would strip this and get it ready to receive these connectors. These are crimp-on connectors which then get soldered later, and I chose DX Engineering connectors because I felt like they were the highest quality for what I could use as an individual ham radio operator, and I could figure out how to use it and I could be successful with it. DX Engineering makes high quality gear. I purchased these, I don't know, it's going back 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and I am absolutely happy with that investment. I'll have these for the rest of my ham way of life. We have everything we need with the exception of one item that we don't need. This is what I would call an electrician's wire cutter. Do not use this to cut your coax. You might be able to get the job done, but you will butcher the end of your coax. And very often when you buy coax in bulk, if you're cutting it yourself, you'll end up with an end that's a little bit janky. This one's a little bit crooked. So I'm going to take a good quality pair of cable cutters and we're going to create a straight cut here on the end of this coax. I would always recommend doing a test piece or two until you become comfortable with using these tools if you don't do this very often. And here we have an end that has been a little bit crushed by the cutter. These flat ends on your cutter are meant to come back and repair this and squeeze so that that plastic core gets round again. So that's what you can use those flat protrusions on your cutter tool for. All right, those two are out of the way. We don't need the crimpers yet. So I have everything here in the order that I'm going to want it, and we'll put these on in just a couple of minutes. And this I'll use to spread out the braid when I'm ready for that. So here is what these cutter tools do. This one is simply a gripper, right? It's just going to grip, and I've got the wrong ones. Let me go back and get the right tools. Would have found that out immediately. You can see that the size of the hole is different because it's accommodating different size coax. All right, we have the right pair now. And so I'm going to take the gripper and just align it to where I think I want it. And that's not the end I just cut and made look pretty. Pay attention here, Bob. There we go. Okay, that's close to the amount that I want sticking out this side. So here on the cutter, you can see that there is a stop right here. And then over here are my 3 blades that are going to make the cuts on the coax. See? Razor blades. Very, very sharp. So I'm going to insert this up against the stop, close, and now I'm just going to grip with my left hand and twist. And now I'm going to twist the other direction for good measure and get all of our cuts here. Now, open up the cutter, and you can see that we have multiple cuts that were made by our blade. The other end of this cutter is just a straight blade, the one that was closest to my thumb, this side. See, that's just a straight blade. We have the same thing. We have a stop right here. We're going to insert this to the stop, close the tool, pull the two apart. And here we are pretty close to having what we want. Now, this dielectric has been cut, but it fits really tight on the inner wire. So let's just see. Yep, I'm going to be able to get it with my fingers, I think. Am I that strong? Yep, we can. There we go. All right. You can see that I have a break, and now I'm just going to make life easy on myself. I am going to get out a needle nose pliers for this part of the job. And now I can finish pulling that dielectric off. Wow. There we go. Beautiful. Okay. Now, there is actually a third cut here on the black sheeting. It's very difficult to see, but you can tell there is a slit right here, and it goes back to about here. So that's how much more of my sheeting I need to remove. So even with really high quality tools and variation in your coax, sometimes the blades don't get the cut completely where it needs to be. So now I can see that that is scored. I'm going to take my utility knife and get this final piece of black sheeting off of here, and it's going to be about that much that I want to pull off, and then that will allow me to get my connector on. And here where it's good that I can still use my gripper, because I have complete control of what I'm doing here, and that's nice. And again, you can do this without these tools. These are just premium tools, and I prefer them for this job. There you go. You can see that now I have what I want. Do not spread out this braiding yet. If we go spreading that out right now, then I'm not going to be able to get all of my pieces on. So now let me show you what we're going to do next. I do like to put shrink wrap on my cables after I get a connector on them. So I'm going to slide that on first. Then I'm going to take the ferrule here. And then finally, now we can spread out this braid because we need to get our connector separated. This is going to go on next, and I need to create a little bit more room for myself. Now we're going to put this on. And now finally we can spread our braid and slide the last piece of our crimp connector on. And see, that has a knurled barrel. So this is going to go underneath the braid right here. These knurled sections are going to go underneath this braid. And then that ferrule that I put on is going to get crimped over top of the braid and that knurled barrel, and that's why this is such a good connection and stays very tight. So let's go ahead and let's just spread out our braid because we want to get that other connector underneath the braid. After you do 15 or 20 of these, you get pretty good at it. If any of these are too long, you can trim them up. That's what this tool is sitting back here for. And after you've done a few of these, you can tell if you have any that are too long. I can see that these are a bit long. I know this from experience, so I'm just going to trim them now because it's easier to trim them now rather than later. Next up, I'm going to put on the final piece of the connector. Now, something I'm going to tell you to be very careful of. If this fits on hard, be very careful as you push in this direction because if you slip, this will penetrate your skin. This is rigid, at least in this piece of coax. This will treat you like your butter and that's a hot knife. It will hurt you. So be careful if you have to put any pressure here. You don't want to create any force. See where the radiator has come to the very tip of my connector? We're going to put some solder there. This tells you that I have everything aligned correctly, and you can see that my braid is now going to be covering that knurled end of the barrel. And now this is where we take the ferrule that we put on here earlier, we push it over top, and see it's covered the braid and the knurled end of that barrel. So what I want to do right now is crimp right here in this section. My crimping tool does not cover the entire ferrule that goes on here. It'll cover about half of it. So I want to crimp from here up this direction. Don't get your crimper on the top end of the connector. That's a solid piece. You're not going to crimp that, just on the ferrule. Make sure that this is seated. You can tell it's seated because I can see my radiator coming out here on the end, so I know I'm aligned properly. And that, my friends, is a really good crimp. And now we can bring the other part of our connector, screw it forward. We can bring our shrink rack up to here. And now let me clean this up a little bit before we shrink wrap this, because if I bring my heat gun on here, I'm just going to blow this wire all over the place. So give me a second to clean up the mess. I can't tell you why, but putting heat shrink on cables and wires is one of the most satisfying things in the world to me. Maybe you can see it, but there's a gloss right up here. That is adhesive that when you buy certain types of heat shrink, they have adhesive on the inside of them. So when you shrink them down, it's not only creating, you know, a tight fit because of how much you've shrunk it, but it's also taking adhesive and applying it across the cable and the connector as well. So that helps with the fit and keeping everything in place. All right, we're going to let this cool down, and then next thing up, we need to get some solder into here, because your radiator, while it might be, ouch, that's still hot. might be touching. Here, you really don't have a solid, good connection. We want this filled up with solder. And I don't want to hold it like this and have solder dripping down into it, because I don't want to melt my dielectric in here or any of the other polymer bits of this connector. So we're just going to keep it kind of slanted a little bit and stick our solder gun right onto this to get it heated up and then feed some solder in. Okay, so for those of you who know how to solder, you can tell me everything I'm doing wrong in the comments below. For those of you who don't know how to solder, then let me just give you a couple of quick hints. The last thing you want to do is load up your soldering iron with solder away from your item and then just kind of, drip it in. And the reason for that is because this is cold and this would be hot. So you're going to end up with a cold joint. In other words, a bad connection. So once I ever find the end of my wire, give me a second. Where is it? I'll show you what I do. Now, as I understand soldering irons, and I don't know that I have the right tip for this, but you know what? I'm not changing it at this point. When you put some solder on them and then you touch your item, it transfers heat better, as I understand things. So I'm actually just going to rest my soldering iron right here on top of that copper wire. So I'm kind of touching the copper wire and touching the connector at the same time. And right now I'll be able to hold this without, there we go. So I have maximum coverage right now, I would say. I'm touching as much of the copper wire and as much of the fitting as I possibly can, because I'm trying to heat this up so that when I start feeding the solder, it flows. So you want to get the item hot first. Now, if I'm on a PCB that's delicate, has delicate circuits, you're going to go about this completely different. So I'm not a soldering expert, but for this task, I can do the job sufficiently. Let's just see if we can start to feed now. Yeah, so I just touched the outside of this barrel and it's already hot. That means I am in a good place to start feeding wire, feeding my soldering into here. Now the other thing I'm going to have to do is make sure if I get overflow that I do something about that, because it'll be on the outside of the connector and then it will not fit into an a SO239. All right, we're feeding pretty good at this point. We're definitely getting that cavity filled up with solder. Pretty big space in there on this one, it feels like. Maybe I should have chosen some larger wire for the job. Get your hand out of the way, Bob. All right, this should be setting off a smoke detector in the house soon. I'm probably good enough, but I'm going to go the extra mile here. Yep, now I'm happy. All right, so let me show you what problem I have created here. So here is the issue that I created for myself. Assume that this side right here was the opening that I soldered, and this side here was the bottom side. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a bump on the bottom side. So if I try to insert this right now into another fitting, it's not going to go in. So I'm just going to hit that with a soldering iron to try to take that bump off of there real quick. And there are times where after I've done soldered, after I've completed soldering something, where I've just taken a razor blade and taken that off. We're going to do it with the soldering iron right now. because this will happen pretty quick. Oh yeah, like almost instantaneously. There we go. And now I'm just going to hit it with the razor blade real quick. Some of you might have a better idea than hitting it with the razor blade, but that just lets me get some of that excess solder off really quick. There you go. Happy with that. Sometimes it's just about being self-sufficient. Of course, we could buy this and order it cut to length and terminated to whatever fitting we might need. But that you can do it yourself, there's something satisfying about that. So hopefully you found this useful and helpful, and you won't be afraid to pick up a piece of coax, cut it to length, and terminate it for yourself from this point forward. Hope you found this useful. Talk to you soon, friends. 73.